Okay, welcome everyone. This is the September Data and Performance Management meeting. If you haven't already, please enter your agency name into the chat box so we know who is participating. Next slide, Elizabeth. So we have two topics for you today. We are going to be talking about the COC Racial Inequity Dashboard as well as the Homelessness Prevention Project Performance Reports. So for the COC Racial Inequity Dashboard, this is kind of a follow-up to conversations that we've had over the past couple months. For those that don't remember or maybe weren't here, we did already release an agency racial inequity dashboard, so that is available in HMIS now if you're interested to see how your own data looks in terms of racial inequity at your agency. And you can look at our user meeting minutes from the last meeting, or maybe it was August, to see that data. But today we're going to be looking at the COC as a whole and racial inequity in our COC. So I'm going to have Elizabeth kick us off and go through the draft that we have for the dashboard. And then we'll be taking feedback from this group on things we need to add or remove, or if there's other data you want to see, and we will go from there. So if you haven't already, and you can unmute yourself, please plan to do so to provide feedback, or you can also put your feedback in the chat. Go ahead, Elizabeth.
Erin, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. So I just want to give a quick summary of the feedback we received previously that helped us develop the COC Racial Inequity Dashboard. So this dashboard will include all project types in HMS. We will be reviewing performance data that a handful of agency admin expressed that they're interested in reviewing. We also got feedback that you guys are interested in reviewing race and ethnicity when reviewing these performance data. And as Erin noted, the following charts are draft data, so please let us know if you have any suggestions or feedback so that we can continue to work on this dashboard and include data and data sets that you're interested in reviewing. So this is what the dashboard would look like. This includes 10 data sets that we will review in the next following slides. We pulled the data from the previous quarter to provide this draft report. OC census and HMS data. When reviewing the race chart, please keep in mind that we are comparing the HMS data to the OC census. When you review a percentage that is higher in the HMS total compared to the OC census, this suggests that the race group is overly represented in OC homeless system. And vice versa, when you review a percentage that is lower in the HMS total compared to the OC census, this suggests the race group is underrepresented. So let's take a look at the race visual. You'll notice that there are a few groups that are highly represented. Two that stand out is American Indian and Alaskan Natives. They make 1% of the OC census, but they are represented in 3% in the HMS total. Another group is Black African American. They are only 2% in the OC census, and they are 12% in the HMS total. A group that is underrepresented is Asian. They are 3%, they make up 23% in the OC census, and they're only 3% in the HMS total. And then we'll move on to ethnicity. When you're looking at ethnicity, it is broken down to Hispanic Latino and non-Hispanic, non-Latino. Multiple races will be counted for Hispanic Latino. For example, a Hispanic Latino Black person and a Hispanic Latino white person will be counted as Hispanic Latino. The percentage in HMS is slightly higher compared to the OC census, which could suggest that Hispanic Latino are overrepresented. You may notice the following graphs compare compared to the first two, that there's a difference. These graphs will include both race and ethnicity. Please note, visuals that include both race and ethnicity will record clients under Hispanic, Latino, regardless of race. The race group Black, African American are overly represented in subpopulation of seniors, veterans, and youth. The race group White is overly represented in chronically homeless, seniors, and veterans. Hispanic and Latinos are underrepresented in chronic homeless, seniors, and veterans, but overly represented in youth. And for household type by race and ethnicity, from our data, we can see that Hispanic Latino make up a large portion of the household with children, and White make up a large portion of household without children. And the last chart you'll see is CS referrals denied by provider. The denials by providers are broken down by race and ethnicity as seen in the chart. The main two reasons for denial was client did not show up or call and lack of ineligibility. The next two slides will be reviewing CS data. When you look at the days between CS match and acceptance, the overall average is 113 days. The race group American, Indian, Alaskan Native, Black/African American, Hispanic, Latino, and multiracial are accepted into programs about half the average days or less. Asian and White are accepted close to the average, while Native, Hawaiian, Asian Pacific Islander took about 3 times longer to be accepted. Days to PH placement. When we look at our data as a whole for days to PH placement, the overall average is 8 days. The average is slightly skewed because of the 0 day from Native, Hawaiian, Asian Pacific Islander right here. Asian and Native, Hawaiian, Asian Pacific Islander are moving into housing units quite quicker than the overall average. However, the population is much smaller compared to the other groups. While the other race groups are taking almost 2 times as long to move into housing units. Successful referrals from CS. Our goal is 50% or greater to have successful referrals. The overall average is 33%, and it is slightly skewed due to the 0% from Native, Hawaiian, Asian Pacific Islander, the 0. For Hispanic Latino, we are reaching our threshold goal, while the other race groups, we are falling a bit short. For exit destination, the missing data average is 25%, which impledes our data analysis of the exit destination data set. Missing data could be due to loss of communication between the clients and service providers. The average days to exits to homeless situation is 30%. American Indian, Alaskan Native, Hispanic, Latino, and Whites are exiting to homeless situation at a higher rate than average. The average for PH exit is 39%. Asian, multiracial, and Native Hawaiian, Asian Pacific Islander are exiting to PH situation at a higher rate than average. And our last chart is return rate by race and ethnicity. The overall rate is 17%. The race group Asian, multiracial, and Native Hawaiian, Asian Pacific Islander are returning into the homeless system at a lower rate than average. Black African American are returning slightly lower than the average rate, and the race group and ethnicity Hispanic, Latino, and White are returning about 2 times the average rate. So we want to open it up to your guys' feedback. We want to make sure that we met your needs, and if there's any performance data that you're interested in reviewing so that we can take note to add, and any suggestions you guys may have. Feel free to leave your feedback in the comments or feel free to unmute yourself.
I'm not seeing anything coming into the chat yet. Something else to think about while and let us know if you want us to go back to any slides so you can zoom in on any of these as well. Consider, does this dashboard include the performance measures that you would want to be able to review by race and ethnicity? Are there other subpopulations that you would like to be able to see race and ethnicity data for? Or is this completely missing the mark? Is there another way that we should be looking at this data? Elizabeth, a question came into the chat. Do we have access to the demographics from the homelessness census or the PIT?
So for the HMS data, it is a report that the HMS team pull due to access level. We pull all of HMS data, so you wouldn't have access to pull the HMS data, but the OC census data is available online.
And we do kind of look at the PIT data for, like at the time the PIT is finalized, we do a little bit of a review of race and ethnicity, but that data quickly becomes old. And so this is meant to take data from HMIS so we can look at it on like a quarterly basis.
I'm asking because I'm wondering if comparing it against the US Census data is a bit, if you could drill down a little bit more with the homelessness census data, because we don't have a sense of disproportion, like of those in the US Census, how many of them are homeless, how many of them have sought out services. It kind of sit between the US Census and HMIS data on that first image.
So like another bar.
Yeah, another band. Yeah, right between the two to give you some idea of how to compare it, because comparing against the census is hit or miss, because a lot of the folks who are going to end up in HMIS may not appear in the census in the first place.
Okay. Yeah, we can include that, like the most recent PIT.
Yeah. And then obviously you're right, it's going to come out of date. It won't be, accurate very quick, but to compare ideally, more apples to apples. Because again, I don't know how many of the HMIS folks actually appear in the US Census.
Okay. Yeah, we can do that. Elizabeth, can you go back to the for the full dashboard?
Yes.
So for those that joined late, we did a quick review of the type of data that we're including in this dashboard. There is a comparison of race and ethnicity data to the OC census. Josh mentioned adding a bar in there for PIT data as well to have that comparison. We also have charts for subpopulation data by race and ethnicity, so chronically homeless, seniors, youth, veterans, as well as household types. And then we have some performance data which matches some of the measures that we're including in our project performance reports.
Hi, Erin.
Hi, Connor.
I have a probably relatively substantial bit of feedback, much of it good. And is there time and space for that right here? I don't want to commandeer.
Yeah, you're good.
So
If you want us to zoom in on anything specific, we have other slides too.
yeah, I'll let you know. If we could, let's zoom in on those CES match and acceptance or some of the performance data. So the first off, thank you so much for taking on this project. I've done a handful of these myself, and I know it's a not an easy task, but a really important one. So I appreciate 2110C and OCHMIS taking the charge on making sure that this data is accessible to our community. Especially the performance data. I think this is the most important way we can slice our data by race and ethnicity to ensure that all people are being served equitably in our system. I will say for performance data, I believe we're going to get more meaningful data if instead of comparing all races to all other races, we compare just in-group to out-group. So what I mean by that is here it's easy to compare, like, well, do people who reported being Black or African-American get, have substantially longer days between match and acceptance than people who reported being white, right? That's a relatively easy question to answer. But the question I believe we should be asking is, does self-reported identification with one race or ethnicity have a substantial impact on the performance, right, on the days between match and acceptance? And if that's the question we're asking, then we should just look at one race at a time. So it's like, does everyone who reported being Black or African-American, and compare that to the bar for all other races combined? Because then we have a more statistically valid comparison instead of trying to compare everyone to average, which is always going to come out a little bit wonky because the group is contained within the average. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does. And I think we did kind of do something like that on the agency dashboard. So it'll be like looking at everyone that's a veteran versus everyone that's not.
Yeah, it's like a shame that that's the more statistically valid way to look at it, because it's so clunky to try to put into a graph or to try to write the calculation for. It just isn't as pretty as this, but it, I think, puts forward a more attainable goal for our community, because if our goal is to get every race or ethnicity to perform above average, that goal is impossible because every group can't be above average because an average is the statistical mean.
Yeah.
But if we're trying to make sure that there's no statistically significant impact on any one race or ethnicity, then we have to compare in-group to out-group so that we have something to work toward. So again, it's an awful looking graph. I can show you the ones that I've made. They're no fun to look at, but they're much more meaningful. I'd also say, like, looking here at American Indian or Alaska Native Americans, it's a clear outlier, and I'd be interested in seeing the sample size. Is that the 6 there, or is the 6 displaying the number of days?
That's days.
So I think anytime we're looking at race and ethnicity, especially where one group could be significantly smaller, and we know is going to be significantly smaller, it's going to behoove us to put sample size in these charts every time. So I just think that's a really important one. And the last thing that I'll say is I really appreciate that you put in Hispanic and Latino in the same chart as race or ethnicity, even though it's not an ethnicity, or pardon me, even though it's not a race, according to the United States Census Department. And so it's really important for us to be able to view all of them at the same time. So thank you for doing that. Can I ask for white here? Is this non-Hispanic white, or does this white include people who also reported being Latino?
So the logic we used, and we got feedback from C4 on this because they're doing the racial inequity work in the COC as well. The logic is if they said they're Hispanic or Latino, that's where they're being counted. And then so the other races, so American Indian, Asian, Black, white, multiracial, that's those that did not say they were Hispanic only.
So that's really good. And I like to hear that, because I'll say I guess I'll just put the cat out of the bag right now. Is in the racial equity analysis I've been doing for the individual coordinated entry system, I'm identifying people who report being Latinx as our area of primary concern. And I want to make that the real focus of my attention in this coming year. And so if we could make that really explicit here in saying non-Hispanic or non-Latinx white on these charts, so that everyone knows that when we're looking at this, we're just talking about the dominant culture, right? When we see white, and there's no ifs, ands, or buts around that, because that was not immediately apparent to me when I looked at this chart, although I'm really happy to hear that that is what I'm looking at.
Okay, great. Thanks, Connor. We can do that.
Cool. That's all the feedback I have. I really appreciate you guys making space for me to bring that feedback, and again for taking up this project. I know it's a big one to take on, and I'm excited to watch this data become more readily available so that we can use it to inform our practice. Thank you.
Thanks, Connor. All right, I'll let everyone sit for a minute to see if anyone has other feedback. So please go ahead and add to the chat, or you can unmute yourself as well, and we'll give it a few more minutes. And I saw Josh's comment agreeing with Connor also. And I did want to mention, after taking your feedback, we will be making some edits to the dashboard. I believe the plan right now is to also share this with C4 to get their feedback. I see Felicia on. I don't know if you have any updates on that, or if that's still something that we're working on, but that was part of the plan also. And then at some point, this will also be going to the COC board for their review prior to releasing.
Thanks so much, Erin. Yeah, I don't have any extensive updates to give right now, but I'm also just wanting to echo what's been shared. Really grateful for the work you all are doing on this dashboard, and I think it will absolutely pair well with the work that we're doing for the COC with C4, and really helping to see where the inequities lie as we work towards more equitable outcomes in our homeless service system. So thank you.
Okay, great. All right. I'm not seeing any other comments or questions coming in. Elizabeth, did you have anything else you wanted to share on this?
I just want to say thank you everyone for your feedback. It will help us improve this dashboard and we'll definitely provide feedback once we update the charts. So just thank you everyone for your time. Erin, would you like me to stop sharing?
Yes, please. All right, so like I mentioned, we are going to take your feedback, make some edits. There will be a round of review again, hopefully by C4. We might bring it back to this group again for another follow-up prior to sending it to the COC board. So we'll have more information at a future meeting. All right, so the other item we wanted to go through really quickly today is the homelessness prevention project performance reports, and then we will adjourn for the day. So we'll probably end a little bit early. Let me share my screen. So this month we completed the homelessness prevention project performance reports. The reporting period is July 1st, 2021 through June 30th, 2022. As usual, we do have project scores for all homeless prevention projects. Across the top, you will see the measures for that project type, and then what percentage of those measures each project met. So if you do have any of these project types, please check out the report. I will be focusing more on the goals and outcomes. So this is looking at all homeless prevention data that's in HMIS. So for homeless prevention, we look at the length of time that the clients are in prevention projects. The goal is 60 days or less, and we're a little bit above our threshold right now, so we're still kind of working on bringing that down. For goal 6, we're looking at adults that maintained or increased their income while they were enrolled in their project. So they have been in the project for at least a year and they're still in the project at the end of the reporting period. The goal for this measure is at least 45%, and we've been actually doing really well on this one. Since we've met it for the last years and a half or so, even during the pandemic, I am going to recommend increasing this threshold to 50%. So I'll let everybody think about that for a minute while I go through these other measures. And just a reminder, the threshold is just a goal for the COC. There isn't currently a penalty or anything if the threshold isn't met. It's just we want to keep kind of challenging ourselves and kind of improving thresholds as much as we can to keep moving forward. So that's what we mean by the threshold here. There isn't a penalty or anything like that. For goal 7, we're looking at adults that maintained or increased their income at the time that they exit the project. The threshold's currently 40% or more. This is another one, we've been meeting it consistently for at least a year and a half. So I'm going to recommend increasing this to 45%. For goal 8, we're looking at clients that are exiting to successful housing situations. So at the time of exit from the homeless prevention project, they are exiting to permanent housing. This is usually a fairly easy measure to meet because the clients are already in housing when they enter the project, and the goal of the project is just to keep them there. So that's usually why this percentage is high. And the last measure that we're looking at is goal 10. It's ensuring clients do not enter the homeless system after being housed through the permanent or the prevention project. So what this is looking at is clients that are exiting the permanent or the prevention project to permanent housing, and then within a 2-year period are they enrolling into another project in HMIS. So we want to keep that number down as much as possible. So that's what this measure is looking at here. So first, for measures 6 and 7, does anyone have any feedback about increasing the threshold for these 5%? So for goal 6, we go up to 50%. For goal 7, we go up to 45%. All right, I'm not hearing any thoughts. I'm going to keep on going. If there's no objections, then I'll be increasing it. So we will update the project performance overview document where we include all of our thresholds, and we'll also publish it so everybody has the update if there's no feedback. Okay, getting into the specific measures a little bit. So again, goal 3 is looking at decreasing the length of time in prevention projects. For each measure, you'll be able to see the subpopulation for different household types. We also include veterans, chronically homeless, and then the project score overall. So 40%, a little over 40% of enrollments are falling within our current threshold of 60 days or less. The next largest group is those from 2 months to about 6 months. So we're doing pretty well on this measure. It's just decreasing those length of stays a little bit more for some of these clients. And you can see chronically homeless clients have a very long length of stay in prevention projects, but it's also a very small number. So it could be because chronically homeless clients aren't necessarily meant for these type of projects, or it also could be a data entry error that needs to be resolved for these clients. Goal 6 is looking at adults that maintained or increased their income while still enrolled in the project. There's a fairly small number of clients in this measure because they have to be in the project for at least a year and still be in the project at the end of the year. The scores for different populations are fairly consistent for all subpopulations. You can see that over 50% of clients maintain their income and another 10% increase their income, which is great. But something you may notice across both goal 6 and 7 is there's 25 to 30% of the clients have no income. So this is at entry and exit, they have no income. This may cause clients to have to return to the homeless system in the future, because if they don't have income, they may be in the same situation where they need that financial support to remain housed. So goal 7, it's the same data, but looking at exited clients. You can see it's fairly consistent again across the different subpopulations, except for chronically homeless, which is a very small number and kind of an outlier. But about 75% either maintained or increased their income, which is great. But we do have that a good quarter of the clients that had no income at entry and exit. Goal 8 is looking at exits to permanent housing situations. Again, we're fairly consistent across the different subpopulations, a little bit lower for households with only children and chronically homeless, but those are small populations, so kind of outliers. The majority of clients that are not exiting to permanent housing situations have missing data at exit. So that is likely due to maybe the client having a disagreement with the project, or otherwise not wanting to provide that destination data, and that's why that information is missing. So to improve this data, the best course of action could be to develop stronger ties with the client, so they do want to provide that information. But this is pretty normal across all project types, is having the missing is usually one of the highest destinations. And our last measure is looking at clients that exit to permanent housing and then later return to the homeless system. And the good news is almost all of the returns to the homeless system are to prevention projects. So what's happening is the client is exiting the prevention project to a permanent housing destination, so that means they are likely remaining in their whatever housing situation they're in. And then within a year or two, the client is returning to the homeless system because they need assistance again from homeless prevention. So they're still housed, but they need additional financial assistance. So the good news is these clients are remaining housed mostly, but the bad news is they're needing more support than they're getting that first time around. And then in terms of how long it's taking them to return to the system, 92% of the clients are returning within the first year. And there's a very small percentage that's returning between 1 and 2 years after they exit. And that is all the data I have on the project performance reports. Does anyone have any questions or comments on this report? All right, I'm not seeing any comments or questions coming in. So we can wrap up early for the day. We will send out the meeting minutes and the recording from this meeting. If anyone has any additional feedback on the COC racial inequity dashboard, they can always submit a ticket and we can incorporate your feedback there. We also will be sending out these homeless prevention project performance reports with the meeting minutes as well, so if your agency can review that data. Otherwise, thank you all so much for attending today. Our next meeting is scheduled for October 13th, and we will announce the agenda and at the next user meeting, and we will also send out an email with the agenda. So thanks everybody for attending. Have a great day.